My name is Harry Yeff. You might have seen me perform earlier, and nice, thank you. So I have a very, very unexpected journey, which surprisingly doesn't end with what you heard me do with my voice. I've been very, very lucky that my work in voice as a musician took me global. I got a lot of attention in my early career for what I could do. But it's actually over the last 6 years, around about that time, I actually stepped away from music, believe it or not. I believed that there was a lot of interesting opportunities when it comes to voice as a holistic theme into investigation. And the more that I developed techniques with voice and the more that I pushed the boundary of my voice, I started to get more and more invitations and opportunities as an artist in research in an academic context, allowing me to be very blessed to travel around the world and meet many of the world's leading thinkers when it comes to emergent ideas in voice. So 6 years ago, I founded R100, which is effectively a studio that uses voice into emerging tech. We explore machine learning, spatial audio, any application, generative system design regarding this wonderful tool that we use every day. So outside of a musical context, people sometimes miss that the human voice and your voices are not only unique across every human being on the planet, they have huge roles in your sense of self and your identity. All of your relationships, whether intimate or in a working context, are massively affected by how you use your voice. And all of my work really focuses on paralanguage, this idea that the voice has merit and purpose outside of language. You were all consciously and unconsciously judging me. So it was actually as a teenager, growing up on a rough part of East London, a council estate, that I found the first sentiments that allowed me to really lean into technology. And one of the key collaborations that has been constant over this 6-year process is human-machine collaboration. When I started to generate the first synthetic voices, getting access to original models and sample RNN, this idea of creating a second self, the ability to, as someone who's already a hyper-specialist in something very niche and very specific, is a leader in the world, how can I improve? So one thing that people don't always know about me was I was actually a county-level tournament chess player growing up, and many of my contemporaries were middle class, I was working class, so they had coaches and they could travel, get training and behave in a way that I just couldn't. So my father actually bought me an early chess engine, and this is nearly 20 years ago. It was then that I realized that this simple system would never get tired of playing me. There was this constant relentless connection, which I had a great amount of appreciation for. And I think these themes and narratives and the stories that we tell around technology really determine if we step away or we lean in. And it was because of my relationship with game theory, because of my relationship with tournament chess, when I got my first access to different forms of technology, to be able to experiment and explore, it meant that I had a very warm attitude towards it. So one thing that people don't often talk about is, outside of mentorship and collaboration, another aspect of game theory is the idea of systems of opposition, the discomfort of being challenged and pushed to the edge of your capability by a system, by a machine. And it's this discomfort that I'm particularly fascinated by. I think when we find a new opportunity in tech, regardless of your expertise, whether you're a poet or a lawyer, what are the stories that you're telling yourself? And the story that I always tell myself is, growth is in the discomfort, and these systems can make you very uncomfortable. There's a saying in chess, which is, with every success, you dip yourself in brass. And really what that means is the things that we adore, the things that we love about our expertise, the achievements that we have, the kind of ego that we build around ourselves, is the very thing that reduces plasticity. And smart systems have this incredible way of breaking that through. So I transitioned from just musician, exploring research, and now very often direct and creative direct emerging tech projects. So this theme of discomfort, how does that apply to some of the work that my studio has done? What you're seeing here is the polyphonic playing ground. This is actually a musical instrument. There's 56 triggers. And the intention of this was to invite world-class, hyper-rehearsed musicians to come along. They would plug their laptop in, and 56 of their sounds were now spread across the structure. So a musician that would normally move a certain way, stand a certain way, had to reach and stretch and play. When you introduce 500 individuals into that room, what you have is a terrified musician. That expertise becomes interrupted. And it's not disrupted, it is intelligently interrupted. It's something that can break the brass of your expertise, break the brass of your ego, moving into a state of what I call wholesome fear. So it was this discomfort that I wanted to continue to lean into. And when it came to my voice, as soon as I could start accessing bespoke models, I generated, and to this day, I now have 100 hours of screaming, shouting, vocal phrases, patterns, which I use as my source and as my data set when I do experiments. And this was one of the first voices that I heard speak back to me. And I'd already spent my whole life sounding like a machine, and now a machine was trying to sound like me.
Zoals op deze tijd, is meeting, dit one of the nice in I formed. This is just, and so this is them we're living there. So that this and this and with and now next.
Bizarre. So, but what I heard there was something very fascinating. Again, I'm a hyper specialist in my own voice. I've spent 20,000 hours experimenting. And when I heard these just spoken phrases, I heard phraseologies that I'd never said. Something that was both me and not me. And instead of the stepping back, because of these other stories and narratives that were present in my mind, I decided to lean in. And this was the birth of Second Self, which was effectively moving outside of speech. Bell Labs invited me to become an EAT artist, which is a very, very old program at Bell Labs, which is a very, very old tech institution. And they effectively commissioned myself and my studio to produce an artwork of interacting, composing with synthetic phrases that were not just speech, but beatbox phrases, singing and performing in this very old anechoic chamber. It was called the room where sound goes to die. It used to be the quietest room in the world, and here you can see one of my idols, John Cage, experimenting with randomization. This is me in the same room, which I share just because it does make me feel slightly cool. But it was in this space where you can see there's a steel net, and I had to compose and write this duet. we were also very fascinated by the embodiment of AI. So outside of generating voice, what is a visualization? What is this kind of Kubrick-like interaction that could occur? So what I'm going to share with you now is a piece that was actually made in 2000 and recorded in 2018. Was released much later, but you will hear and see a composed duet where the phrases that I speak, there are these generative replies, this kind of opponent-like collaborative relationship in the form of a piece of video art. So it was in this collaboration, a string of research was born, which we call machine-inspired voice. What are all the different methodologies that I can embrace these systems to push my voice further? So over the last 3 years, there's been constant rehearsal, and to my discomfort, we started to generate phrases that I couldn't keep up with. And that did finally make me uncomfortable in a way that I didn't like. So what I have here is a visualization of a system where we started moving into the visualization of voice. And I've mentioned this idea of opposition, but what are stories and narratives regarding collaboration? So this was the birth of a system that we call voice gems, and the voice gem system is a 200,000 particle system that responds directly to the unique features found in each of your voices. So the color and the form would generate something unique. Speaking of the embodiment of AI, we started to be able to combine these systems. So you have a synthetic voice with a visual embodiment. And it's this kind of rehearsal and training. I have an example for you all right now. So it's this constant back and forth, a chess-like interaction led to hundreds of new phrases, speed, technique that was pulled out of me. And this is where I think augmentation occurs, where this balance between opposition and collaboration, this fascinating thing happens, where we can pull new things out of ourselves, whether it's communication, a skill set, in my case, the voice. And there was a moment a number of years ago in New York where we brought one of these systems, the visual component, as an installation, where people would come and want to see their voice as a sculpture. And a huge aha moment with the 500 people that were queuing up was actually a father with his daughter like a koala bear on his leg. Didn't want to speak to anyone, had no interest in sharing, extremely shy. And she slowly walked up to our system, which produced an image that's 2 stories high. And she waited her turn, and when she put her mouth to the microphone, she started with these very tiny sounds. And when she saw this huge representation, she started to scream and shout and laugh. And this is the power of augmentation, the fact that a behavior, a skill, a new expression, by connecting with these systems, can have an almost spiritual-like quality. And I think tech and emerging tech has this avoidant attachment style of always thinking that everything is over here. But how is it coming back to pull out very human and almost spiritual-like qualities? So this really, really inspired Voice Gems, where we actually started to enhance the original Voice Gem system to be able to produce these unique pieces in color and form, the 200,000 particles producing structure and color based on the unique features found in a human voice. So we started to produce these more and more. This was a large-scale voice gem, which is actually generated from hundreds of voices, producing these forms and sculptures, being able to see and hold something which is normally like smoke, which is like a human voice, something that you can't hold. And it's in these installations we started to see this pattern where people wanted to tell stories, they wanted to share things, they wanted to capture moments. But the thing that we were surprised by most was the original bits of global press resulted in hundreds of emails from people that wanted to preserve the voices of loved ones that are no longer here. Extremely intimate, personal messages which exist as voice notes that are on cold devices like iPhones. We have all of this precious data. We have precious voice data that we don't have a tomb for. We don't have a ceremonial place. So Voice Gems, and as voice as a gateway, starts to tap into this idea that there are new ceremonies. Digital can be spiritual. So we've now collected 150 voices from around the world. We have pieces with National Geographic, Critically Endangered Species, Ai Weiwei, Jane Goodall. But it's this piece that's my favorite. And there's a very, very different narrative.
Tell me your name. What's your name?
Lucy.
Where did you go today?
Where are you?
You went to the zoo?
Yeah.
You went in the Wawa?
Yeah.
What animals did you see?
Penguin.
A penguin?
Yeah.
Such a simple moment between a father and a daughter. We isolated the voice of the daughter. Children produce brighter gems based on the rules that we set 2 years ago. But what I love about this is there's all these simple interactions that come and go. And do we really give presentness and attention to that? And this piece that was collected by this father, he says is so fascinating because her voice has already changed so much. And every 2 years, we're going to continue to produce new works. So what is a digital ceremony? Is this a digital ceremony? What is the role of spirituality in emergent tech? What are the new traditions, the new rules that could emerge from experimentation? So what you're actually seeing here isn't a digital render. This is a lab-grown, 3D printed crystalline form, grown with aluminum mineral generated from the voice between lovers. And we've now replaced 12 diamond engagement rings from laughter-generated physical sculptures. So we will continue to use voice to experiment. But again, we've had opposition, we've had collaboration, but there's a third pillar, which I see as mentorship. So 2 years ago, I was actually approached by Leipzig International Ballet to creative direct an emerging tech project, introducing new ideas, new sentiments into a very, very traditional opera house, established in the 17th century. And the idea was to actually bring elements of machine learning, but also just very, very simple APIs, and offering them to all of the senior creatives in the opera house. So the work ended up being generally created from all of the constant relationship, whether it's the set designer, the lighting, the script, the choreography, all had generative partnership. And it was this work that we were able to kind of predict what we see as a future workflow. This idea that we will all have a second self. We'll be able to see non-human movement to generate set pieces and ideas which become large-scale physical structures. But it's the fact that regardless of how conservative a system is, it's the stories that we tell ourselves. And there was a huge pushback from the opera house to embrace these tools. But when they realized that no creative was going to be replaced, it was an enhancement, it was a mentorship that generates insight. There was a very, very unique workflow over the 2 years. And it resulted in some interesting outcomes. There were 35 international dancers at Leipzig, and we started to experiment with fusion of identity, bringing in whole new dancers, which are combinations, in theory producing thousands of frames, so thousands of dancers. So my main sentiment is, I really believe that we can all do more if we tell ourselves the right stories, if we have total consent and ownership over the systems in which we create with. I think there is something very, very exciting. But it's a very real question, why don't people embrace these tools? I think we still think that design and elements of creativity, there's this obsession with the replacement and automation of the human identity. I think a kind of puppetry or replacement taps into something very visceral and deep into all of us. So I'm much more interested in this idea of augmentation, the augmented human, and effectively skill enhancement, expertise 2.0. And I think if we embrace these tools, if we tell new stories, we can change narratives of fear to narratives of hope. Thank you very much.